Hi, my name is Marit Oberly, and my paper is titled Fostering a Powerful Connection Between the Flipped Classroom and Academic Success of All Learners. And I hope you leave this presentation with something new about flipped learning, maybe even with an idea for how you can use flipped learning in your field. So let's start with what flipped learning is. Flipped learning essentially takes what might have been done in the classroom as direct instruction. So, for example, a lecture, and records it. So, the instructor would record that information, and the student would watch that direct instruction at home. The reason you would flip is, well, let's start with why I flipped, was because I was frustrated with the different questions that were all coming up on review days, and I felt like I wasn't able to meet the needs of all of my students. So that frustration on review days prompted me to create some screencast videos. And when students were using them to begin with, just on review days, I noticed a high level of usage, especially from my English language learners. Students reported that videos were low risk and an easy way to understand the thinking process of mathematicians. So the big ideas here and the big reasons for flipping, for me specifically and for others, were the inability to answer all student questions, the lack of class time, the frustration that instructors have for students who are absent from class, and many other reasons. So flipping shifts class time significantly. I love this comparison between a traditional classroom and a flipped classroom. Especially notice the difference in independent practice time between the traditional classroom and the flipped classroom. So the question kind of becomes, if you have all this additional time when you're flipping, what do you do with the additional time? And I think that's the real power behind flipping your classroom. The new time that you have to help students engage in the content. So before flipping my classroom, there were 3 common complaints that I heard from students. We didn't have enough time to practice, it went too fast, or I already knew this, and I'm never going to use this in my real life. In this presentation, I hope to address those 3 complaints. So first, the class time, the complaint that we didn't have enough time to practice. So flipping your classroom allows teachers and students to have more time to engage in the content. The teacher role changes completely. Teachers now have the time to support students as they are the ones that are engaging with the content. Before, I was up there thinking about math and really problem solving all day, but now with my flipped classroom, I'm noticing that my students are the ones that are truly thinking about math all hour long. All right, so the second complaint my students had was it went too fast or I already knew everything. Flipping classrooms allows for students to self-pace their learning. It also allows teachers to differentiate instruction. So because of this self-pacing, students are able to now take ownership of their learning. And as an instructor, I'm able to meet the needs of my high flyers and of the students who come in feeling like they really don't have even the basic understanding of the concepts that we're studying in class. The third complaint, that I'm never going to use this in my real life complaint, is addressed through the flipped classroom because there's now time for real world application. There's time for labs, for use of manipulatives. There's time to engage with cool technologies and to do projects. You're looking now at a picture of a project that I'm actually just now doing with my students. It's a 2-week project that I've never had time to do before I flipped my classroom. So we finished our unit on rational and irrational numbers, and now students are able to make a connection between what we're studying in class and their real life by making that personal timeline. Another effect on students once your classroom is flipped is that they are engaging in technology tools. One study showed that learners engaged on average with the content 2.5 times in class and an additional 1.5 time at home. So when we have students who are interacting more with the content, interacting more with peers and more with instructors, we know that those students are learning more. So all of these places where this interaction overlaps leads to higher levels of student understanding. Another effect on students is that their engagement increases and so does their attitude. Thinking back to that same algebra example, Smith found an increased level of cognitive engagement because students were pacing their own learning. Also, an increased psychological engagement because they were able to ask questions of the instructor more often. So students are able to pause, rewind, and play the videos, which leads into the last important piece with the flipped classroom. An increased level of engagement and understanding for English language learners. That pause, rewind, and replay the teacher piece is huge for students who come in with low content level confidence. In addition, English language learners benefited in my class, and I know in other classes, from having the combo of both verbal and nonverbal instruction. Now, who's going to push back on the flipped classroom? Well, I think it's the constructivist thinkers that really might find issue with the fact that students are still getting direct instruction at home. So they're still watching the teacher think through examples and taking notes on that. So I think that is the major limitation of the flipped classroom. But in conclusion, research will continue to inform best practices. But to this date, I would say that it suggests a lot of positive things that the flipped classroom can bring about to learning environments. Thanks for listening.